Good afternoon, everyone. I am Ranels Ragiza, and I'll be your discussant this afternoon. Now, in our previous discussion, we covered the cognitive aspects of language assessment in the criteria for evaluating language quality, which are both essential for designing effective language tests. Today, we will focus on the methods of test validation and explore qualitative methods of validation to ensure our assessments are both reliable and meaningful. Now, test validation ensures that a test measures what it is intended to measure and supports the intended interpretation of scores. Now, it involves gathering evidence to confirm the accuracy and appropriateness, of course, of test validations for their intended purpose. The validation framework outlines the process of organizing and assessing evidence to support test score interpretations. Validation methods fall into three areas, which are psychometric and statistical methods, which analyze reliability and fairness, and the qualitative methods, which examine test content and user perspectives. And lastly, cognitive psychology research, which studies how test takers process and respond to test items. Between 1950 and 1970, Lato and Clark contributed to early test validation by focusing on content validity and predictive or concurrent validity, which primarily supported score based predictions rather than deeper theoretical explanations. Validation methods during this period included correlation analysis, which is examining relationships between test scores and outcomes. Next is the content analysis, evaluating test items' relevance. And lastly, factor analytic techniques, identifying underlying test constructs. Now, its major contributions between the years 1970 to 1980 was introduced construct validity in language testing, and on 1980's shift moved from predictive or concurrent validity to studying test taking processes and performance factors. Samuel J. Messick, a psychologist at ETS, introduced the unitary concept of construct validity and emphasized the role of social values in test consequences. His work influenced language teaching but was criticized for being too abstract with limited practical guidance. Bashman and Palmer introduced test usefulness, defining five key qualities, which are construct validity, reliability, authenticity, interactiveness, and impact. The framework became essential in language test development, but it lacks a clear way to prioritize these qualities or assess overall test usefulness. Cronbach viewed validation as building a validity argument through a coherent analysis of supporting and opposing evidence, while Kane and his associates formalized this by applying practical argumentation theories, systematically identifying threats to assumptions, and guiding evidence collection to address them. Kane's validation theory does not expand beyond Messick's comprehension framework, but offers a clear structure for practitioners. Its strengths lie in prioritizing evidence, synthesizing it for validity evaluation, and tracking validation progress. Bachman, Palmer, and Chappell adopted Kane's framework with a focus on task use and consequences. They emphasized the network of inferences connecting task performances to score interpretation and application. Domain description ensures tasks represent the target domain, relying on judgmental based evidence, and task conditions can influence performance and the demonstration of language skills. Scoring rubrics are developed using rater protocols and task discourse analysis to reflect intended skills. And quantitative methods validate rating scales, while rater inconsistencies can introduce errors in performance assessments. Generalization links observed scores to universe scores through reliability analysis. G theory examines the effects of facades, example raters, tasks on score dependability, while multifaceted RASH measurement assesses the influence of individual raters, tasks, and their interactions on reliability. Explanation links universe scores to interpretations by assuming test tasks reflect real world language abilities. Correlational or covariance analysis examines relationships between test items and other measures to validate constructs. Experimental studies manipulate task features and testing conditions to assess learning interventions. Group difference studies examine score variations to validate test use or identify threats like construct under representation or irrelevant factors. Self-report data, including verbal protocols, reveal test-taking processes. Discourse analysis examines test language use, while questionnaires and interviews provide insights into test takers' experiences and strategies. Observation and post test interviews help identify test taking strategies and potential biases. Logical analysis involves expert judgment of required skills, and extrapolation ensures test scores relate with real world performance, such as, or for example, if a speaking test score is highly correlated with real life conversation ability, it supports extrapolation. Utilization links score interpretation to real world decisions. Score reports guide users as they rely on them for decision making. Cut scores determine eligibility for selection, placement, or licensure. For example, a university uses an English test score to decide if a student needs additional language support. Language teaching research focuses on the consequences of test use, especially its impact on teaching and learning. Over the past decade, the field has evolved, refining the argument based approach to test validation and expanding research to better address a variety of assessment types. For example, if a test encourages teachers to emphasize only certain topics, research on washback helps ensure this doesn't limit students' overall learning. Recent research on language testing consequences has focused on washback, the effect tests have on teaching and learning. Recent advances in validation theory require clear, coherent arguments to link test scores to their intended uses and to address potential issues, such as if a language test is used for students' placement. Refined validation ensures that the test accurately measures the necessary language skills, preventing teachers from narrowing their instruction to just test content. McNamara highlighted that language testing combines applied linguistics with measurement, blending language theory and evaluation methods. For example, a speaking test reviews both natural language use and reliable scoring. And McNamara argued that language testing is unique because it blends applied linguistics with measurement. Another example, a speaking test should capture real conversational skills while also providing reliable scores. Psychometrics uses quantitative methods to measure traits like language ability, while qualitative techniques help understand how language is used in real testing situations. For example, a speaking test might use scores, which we call psychometrics, and also analyze recorded conversations, which is qualitative, to assess a student's oral proficiency. Before 1990, language testing research mainly focused on measuring outcomes using objective and quantitative methods. And then after 1990, the emphasis shifted to understanding the processes behind performance, examining how test takers actually use language during tests. For example, early studies looked only at test scores, while later research also explored the thought processes and strategies students use during a speaking test. Now let's have Leah Van Le. Leah Van Le challenged the belief that speaking tests naturally mimic everyday conversation. He also urged researchers to study not only oral proficiency scores, but also the underlying processes that lead to those scores. Jacoby and Osh in the year 1995 introduced the concept of co-construction, which means that in conversations, speakers collaboratively create meaning, shape actions, and form interpretations together. Following Jacoby and Och's concepts of co-construction and Bandler's call for research, language testing experts have conducted studies to better understand how oral proficiency is assessed in speaking tests. The interlocutor frame, developed by Cambridge English Testing, provides interview guidelines and improved rating scales to better assess test taker speech and, of course, the scores in speaking tests. Traditional validity relies on evidence that tests accurately measure what they intend. The argument based validation approach focuses on specifying and evaluating the proposed uses and interpretations of test scores. Imagine trying to solve a puzzle. The principle is simple. You need to match the pieces to create a complete picture. But in practice, some pieces don't fit perfectly and you have to test different combinations until it works, right? Validation is like that puzzle. It's about ensuring all the pieces, such as evidence, assumptions, interpretations, fit together to give you a clear and accurate picture of what the test is measuring, which can be challenging in real world situations. Introspective techniques like think alouds and recalls help capture cognitive processes during or after a task. Then Sasaki argues that these methods complement quantitative analysis, offering deeper insights. Then holistic scales require raters to focus on a key or a few key features, but the lack of detailed descriptors can make it harder to assess the construct accurately, resulting in less reliable and valid scores. All right. And mixed methods research, or MMR, combines quantitative and qualitative approaches to provide a fuller understanding of test performance, rater cognition, and stakeholders' views in language assessment. Problems and difficulties of MMR says in here, validity is to quantitative research and credibility is to qualitative research. Imagine you're building a house. Validity in quantitative research is like the foundation. It ensures the structure is solid and built on reliable measurements. And then credibility and qualitative research, on the other hand, is like the design of the house. It ensures the style and functionality reflect the true needs and experiences of those who will live there. Both are essential, but one focuses on solid ground, and the other one is on meaningful, authentic expression. All right, and that's the end of our lesson. Thank you so much for listening.